I'm joined today, back again with Matt McGlone from the Alternative View fanzine. Matt, you're very welcome back to talk from the Terrace. Firstly, I just want to go straight in. No introductions today. I just want to go straight in, Matt, and just get your opinion on yesterday.
Well, I think yesterday was probably a game that was always coming because it came last week at Livingston. We're basically playing with a player pool of 12, 13 players twice a week. They're not getting a rest. We are 4 or 5 players out at the minute. We had a threadbare squad as it was. So really, we're being shown up for the fact that we don't have an option to rest some players and change some players, which is the natural course of a football season. Players are playing twice a week, travelling as well. And yesterday, people will say, he doesn't have a plan B. Well, like any tradesman, you need the tools. And he doesn't have a plan B because he doesn't have a bench. You can't have a plan B to enact and make something happen if you don't have the players to do it. We had young Moffat on the bench yesterday. Beaton. There's nothing there. We've got a threadbare squad and we're thrashing the players to death that we've got. We know we're in a season of transition. And this is going to be a tough ride. I felt it was a real toxic atmosphere at the end of the game yesterday. Obviously, fans are unhappy. It seems like if Celtic don't score early, then the longer the game goes, then the more danger we're in. The play was rushed, hurried. Crosses were getting thrown over without any real thought. Hit the bar 3 times. A Yeti misses from 2 yards out. Just one of them goes in and we've got a victory. But I think the whole problem here is not Ange. Because if you take Ange out of the equation, let's say all the people that don't like Ange, we sack Ange tomorrow. What do they think they're going to get in? We waited 12 weeks to get a manager the last time. So Ange is not the problem here. The problem is Ange doesn't have the tools to do the job. That's my take on it. And if there's players there who should be playing who are not getting a game, then I'd like to know who they are.
Yeah, it was, I suppose frustration was a word yesterday. After the game we heard the boos. We saw people take to social media and blaming players. I didn't see much criticism towards Ange, I have to say. Now maybe there was. I didn't stay too long on social media after it because I was disappointed with the performance. I was disappointed with our finishing. We had plenty of chances to win the game. I've seen people going on how good Dundee United were. Yeah, they done well for their goal. Possibly could have had a penalty, but overall, I think Celtic had much more possession and were the home team. But as you say, you're saying the blame doesn't lie at Ange's door. We had a CEO who lasted 72 days, Matt. If you take Ange out of the equation, we have new players. We've no CEO. We've no one has been replaced since last March in the recruitment department of our players. We failed to have a team in place to give it a good go in the Champions League. And we have been very, very disappointing away from home. So if Ange does come out of the equation, we are left with the coaching team we had at the end of last season and the board that we had at the end of last season. So the more things change, Matt, the more things they stay the same at Celtic.
Yeah, let's say Ange leaves tomorrow. Hope that doesn't happen. But let's say he did. We have no manager. We have no captain who's fit to play on the park. We have no chief executive. We've got no director of football. We've got 2 guys in the dugout who were there last season, and one has been there managers before and managers before him. So yeah, everything is staying the same. Celtic need real change. And, the fans, the figures came out last week there, the end of year results. And, it was said how great the figures were, despite the pandemic. The figures are great because people like you and I and tens of thousands of other people put money into the club and get hee-haw back. That's why the figures are good. The figures are good because the fans have turned up and the fans have paid their way. We shouldn't be kidding about anything else that's going on here. The fans are the people who keep Celtic going, and that's why the figures were reasonably good considering there's a pandemic on, because fans paid knowing they weren't going to get any games, and they were sitting watching a dodgy stream, and they paid full whack, 660 quid upwards or 480 quid upwards, wherever your seat is. So we're due something back. We're due a team on the park. Last season, I mean, we could have a whole programme about what went wrong last season, but there's no point in getting back into that. This is a season of change, a season of opportunity, a season to make things happen. And what's happened? Very little. We've brought players in, but remember, we've let 16, 17 players go. And we have to bring in quality. Ange, if I was Ange right now and I wanted a new backroom team, I'd be up chapping the door this morning. Chapping whose door? Because there's no chief executive there. If you can get a hold of Dermot, then you'd be doing pretty well. But he should be asking for his own guy. I'm pretty sure he wants his own guy. And I think this is a time of strength now for him when the chips are down and we've got a real challenge in our hands, that he goes and asks for some help here. Now, it may be that Ange's turn, he did say at the start of the season that he gives everybody a clean slate, which meant that Gavin Strachan and John Kennedy would be given opportunities to work with Ange, to see if Ange could work with them and to see if that would work. Well, if it works, I mean, I don't see any chat going along in the dugout. Ange stands on the edge of the dugout, the other two don't come out. Now, I'm pretty sure that's by instruction. I'm standing here myself. You know, most managers have their assistant or a tactician or a coach nearby to rub things off, to have a chat about. But Ange seems to be doing the whole thing himself. And maybe he doesn't want another guy, and maybe I'm just talking rubbish here. But you would think that a manager who comes into another country would want somebody to work with him that he's worked with before, or he knows he can work with and has been working with them in the past, whether that past has been Australia, whether that past has been Japan. But, you know, we are dreadfully short of players, and a lot look pretty good until we get a few injuries. You know, we have a new centre forward who was injured in the warm-up there. I have a go at his name here. Giacomakis, who was the top or second top scorer in the Dutch league last year. We've got 4 or 5 players out who are all international players. We have nothing left. There is no plan B, because with plan B, you need players to make plan B happen. If you look at that dugout yesterday, there was no plan B. You know, seriously, the only other forward there, if to bring him on, was young boy Moffat, who's never played for the first team in a competitive game. Now, if you look at that, that's how threadbare and bad the Celtic squad is. The people upstairs know this. I wonder if Dermot cares anymore. I don't think he does. I think Dermot Celtics are a toy for him. He's got plenty of shares in it. There's nobody in that board who will call Dermot out. Nobody. Absolutely nobody. Nobody will say, hey, hang on a minute. You know, we're board members here. We're listening to the fans. Who's going to do that? It's too comfy. Everything's too comfy. Nobody will challenge Dermot Desmond. And that's a major problem that we have right now. People will say, sack the board. I know all about sacking boards. But you can't sack a PLC board. Because if you remove 4 or 5 PLC guys, all you're doing is moving the seats around. Because another 4 or 5 PLC guys come in with the exact same remit, the exact same nod and donkey attitude, and let the man at the top call the shots. So we have a problem here.
He certainly, Ange, he certainly cuts a lonely figure on the sidelines when there's 60,000 people behind him. That's just my opinion from yesterday. I feel, Matt, that Dermot was probably more interested yesterday in the golf than he was in Celtic Football Club, and that is sad, because We threw away last year's title. We threw away history, and we now have a golden opportunity to qualify automatically for the Champions League. And if that's all they're interested in, surely it's worth gambling on putting back in the manager and putting a team on the park and a squad together that could win the league. Because let's face it, Matt, whoever wins this league this year, if it ain't Celtic, they won't be any great shakes. There's no world beaters in that league. And we have been beaten by Livingston, who are not world beaters. We've been beaten away by Hearts, who are not world beaters. We've been beaten by the Newco, who are not world beaters. And that's been shown. Now, as bad and all as our away results are, man, we're 6 points behind. We've got 10 points out of a possible 21, which, at Celtic standards, it's a long time since we were seeing results like this at the start of a season.
Yeah, it's not good. But to solve any problem, I think we have to look at what the problem is. The root core of the problem is we don't have enough good players. For me, what else could another manager do with the players that are there? We have already, I thought before Livingston last week, I didn't think Livingston could happen, to be honest with you, with this new management team. Well, with this new manager and team, not management team, because there isn't a management team. I didn't think last week could happen, but it did. I mean, they lost. They drew 1 each with Motherwell last week. We drew 1 each with Dundee United yesterday. It's a far bigger outcry in Scottish football in general, not among Celtic fans, but people saying how poor Celtic are. When they drew 1 each with Motherwell last week, we drew 1 each with Dundee United yesterday. So there's plenty of people out there who are very interested in us failing. Absolutely no doubt about that. But the bottom line to all of this is a poor pool of players. There is no options. These players are being played constantly, week in, week out. The Livingston manager mentioned last week there that he was watching Celtic playing away in Seville, while his players were sitting with their feet up, and they practiced all week at a game plan, which wasn't very complicated. Just stop the other team playing, just put in some pretty physical challenges and just pack your goal area and hope for a breakaway. Because Celtic are pretty much going to be sure to give you a goal through poor defending, which is exactly what happened. Welsh was completely daydreaming and let Shinnie score the goal. So, again, this week we're at Aberdeen on Sunday, and we've got a big game on Thursday night. Again, Aberdeen will be sitting with their feet up, watching and playing probably a pretty similar game to what Livingston did. It won't be all-out attack from Aberdeen, that's for sure. And Celtic are going to have to go and try and do it all again. But with the same players, and here we go back to the same problem. Same players, and how much can you get out of them? Ange must be pulling his hair out, wondering, he said the other week there he felt he probably walked under a ladder. I mean, he was unlucky with the amount of players that are injured. But the bare facts are there, Andrew. If we have players out, like McGregor, like Juranovic, who got injured yesterday, Julian and Kyogo, then we have got nothing left in reserve. We are then dipping into the tank of young players and guys who are on the bench yesterday, who have been here for a long time and are not good enough. That's the bottom line, unfortunately.
Yeah, and when Ange came in, we had the press conference with Don McKay when Ian Bankio was saying that he was the best thing since sliced bread. He'd been headhunting, he'd come highly recommended. They'd done the research, they'd done the homework, and they brought in a man who lasts 72 days. Don was saying when he came in that he was going to, bring in best practice to the club. He was going to see what was best practice at the top clubs in the world. Well, that certainly hasn't happened because he's moved on. And there are rumours as to why he moved on, but we'll probably never get to find out. Like when Brendan Rodgers done the midnight flip, we'll never get to know the real facts, because obviously there's agreements signed in the boardrooms before this But what does piss me off is that when Eddie Howe didn't come, it was at 5 o'clock on a Friday when the news broke, or maybe 4 o'clock. Then you're into the weekend. Don McKay, everyone knew at the club that he was leaving, and yet again, it's a Friday night, 5 o'clock, when everyone's switching off for the weekend, and then it comes, and it stinks. And I'd love to be here, Matt, talking positive about away results, having a good run in Europe. But again, we're back to the same old thing that, we're not preparing. The people running the club they're not running the club properly and haven't been.
No.
Like, standards slipped when Brendan Rodgers left the club, in my opinion.
Yeah, did you see, the Celtic setup is not, for me, a healthy one. You have got the one main figure, Dermot Desmond. Now, people in the PLC board have not and will not challenge him. So what do you have then? You have a group of people in this PLC board who love being Celtic directors, who love all the nice trimmings that go with that. They're not actually challenging and sort of saying, hang on a minute, no, that's not right. Get that guy in, oh, we should have a director of football. Well, why is MD accountable? Why is there not a chief executive in place? Why did we headhunt the other guy and he lasted 72, 73 days? Why is all this happening? Who's accountable? Excuse me, can I ask you a question, boss? Why did you screw up there? Well, don't ask me a question like that, because you won't be on the PLC board anymore if you start questioning me. That's the problem here. We have a serious problem of people not being accountable, and they're running a mass organisation funded by supporters, and they're not doing their jobs properly. Who on that board will say, hang on a minute, this isn't right? All these people are meant to be on the board for business acumen. They're running a club without a director of football. I don't know what's going on in the scouting department. There is no chief executive. You've got a manager brought in at the last minute after you gave another guy 12 weeks to tell you to go away. Seriously, running business acumen. What kind of business runs successfully that's not funded by fans? It should still be in business. These people are only in business because of you and I and tens of thousands of other people. That's the bottom line here. It's dead simple. It's really straightforward. I'm sick to death here.
Matt, were you surprised? You mentioned no director of football. Were you surprised when an employee of Dundee, Gordon Strachan, was brought in as a consultant on a 3-month contract? But yet nobody was told, because there's no communication with the board, but nobody was told what his role was going to be.
Well, have we really been told what his role was going to be? I think there was a wee press release put out that he was going to be dealing with younger players and women's football, and looking at how things could be improved in certain departments. In
3 months?
For 3 months. It just tells you they don't seem to have anybody there, but Gordon Strachan's a go-to guy because he gets on well with some of the PLC people, and he's a guy to bring in. Because if you're never out of the boardroom, then why don't I just give him a job then? 3 months. That's the way they're looking at it. That's not right. Celtic are not being run structurally properly. It's dead easy to see. And you and me and everybody else, we are frustrated and banging our heads only because we love this club, because we believe in where we can go, and we've got overwhelming faith. We're in it from the beginning for the long haul. Me, you, families, brothers, sisters, fathers, mothers, daughters, the whole lot. But
yeah, we went to bed last night, Celtic fans. We wake up Celtic fans, no matter what the result is. Yeah. But there is, Matt, there is an undercurrent which we're now seeing of people starting to point fingers at players, which I think is wrong, because as you say, they may not be good enough, they may not be experienced enough. We can't point the finger at Ange just yet because we don't know who's bringing in the players. We don't know who's signed these players. We don't know, what players was Ange involved in. Well, sure, he was involved in the Kyogo signing because a Japanese player that he knew well, but sure, he's involved in that. But we don't know, there's always been a kind of a thing in the background. Players are signed they only get a chance with the manager when the squad is very thin, and you don't know. Well, did they bring them in? Did the board bring them in? Did Gordon Strachan bring them in now because he's in this role? It's very confusing when you sit on the sidelines and just go like in every business and every organisation, there's a structure. There's a HR department and they recruit the people. The boss says to them, go out and recruit. I need an accountant, I need a driver, I need X, Y and Z. And that's what they do. But nobody seems to know who is involved in the signing of these players. And I have to say some of the signings have been good. And we have been unlucky with injury. But we haven't seen maybe enough of other players to make judgment on them. Where do you sit, Matt, on the players that we brought in? I'm glad some of the players are gone that were at the club last year because they didn't want to be there. They didn't put in a shift last year, so I'm glad they're gone, and I'm glad that there's a clean slate with new players coming in. Now, whether they're good enough or not is another question. But what I've seen some good players out there, Matt. I've been impressed by some of the new players, and I just want to get your thoughts on it.
Well, obviously, Kyogo is a very good player. He is he's pretty much a forward running player who works tirelessly. He runs the channels. He runs out wide. He runs everywhere to get the ball. You know that the game is alive when he's playing. If we had 2 or 3 of him, we'd be really doing pretty well. You'd like to think that Ange would maybe look at the market in January in Japan. I think football's closed down then, and I think he obviously knows players better there than he would know players here because he's been working in Japan. It's like asking a manager here who the best players in Japan are when he's been working here. Well, Ange's been working there and he's trying to figure out who the best players here are. Obviously, Juranovic, he looks a good player. He's been unlucky, played out of position first game at Ibrox. He's been played out of position a couple of times to fill in other players. Giacu Makis, I've got that right. We don't know much about him. We don't know if what he can do. We can only go on his past record. Liam Scales, saw half an hour of him on Thursday night there. Looks quite an assured player. Looked very shaky at the back, looked very nervous. I don't like getting on players' backs who have just come into the club. I know that Starfelt has had good games. I thought he played well in Alkmaar. I thought he played well at Ibrox. They were big pressure games. But maybe Liam Scales given a run at centre-back. Shaw, Burogahide, I haven't seen much of them. The question is who signs these guys? Well, who knows? I suppose the important thing is whether they can play football or not, and whether they're good enough for the first team. And that we don't know. Joe Hart, he's come in. Joe Hart's a player of experience. I think he does very well. There was an incident yesterday in the game where Ralston going down the right wing, he'd been in for a 50-50, very solid tackle, and he came out at the worst. Just because, that happens in 50-50 tackles. And he must have been down for about 40 seconds, really writhing about in agony, right in front of where I was sitting. And the referee, as he had done earlier with Montgomery, he'd ignored him when he was down. Joe Hart ran out. He ran right over past the halfway line to see if he was okay. And as club captain, had a word with the referee as to why he took so long to stop the game for Ralston to get treatment. So I like to see that in a player. I like a guy like Joe Hart taking responsibility. And you can see that Celtic have every ball boy at the minute with a ball, and as soon as the ball goes out, they quickly roll another ball back and don't wait for the ball coming back that Davis went out. Joe Hart has got a ball at his feet. Wherever the ball lands behind the goal, he's got a ball at his feet within about 3 or 4 seconds from ball boys nearby to keep the game going quickly. I like him. He's obviously a good player. The rest, well, where are they?
Yeah, I've been I know Hart had a clanger in Holland, but I think you bang on the money when you talk about how quick he's getting the ball back into the game, how quick he is to react to the referee. He's vocal. He's talking to centre halves through the game. Now it is hard to be a centre half in that attacking format, Matt, because like the fullbacks are up the pitch, and if they break, if anyone breaks against us, you know, we are liable, and we've seen it. We're liable to be caught in the break, and we have been because of the system we play. So it's exciting to watch going forward. Nerve-wracking at times in the back. We know from last season how nerve-wracking it was when we come up against set pieces. But I think Hart is been a massive improvement, and the type of player that will bring on younger players. And I can't see anyone challenging him. You know, last season we had 3 keepers rotating. It's not going to happen this year unless he gets injured. He's the man for the season. And I've been so impressed with his attitude as well, and listen to his interviews and that. And he just, you know, he's a guy. You can, you know, Fraser Forster is happy to sit on the bench in England and pick up his check. Joe Hart wasn't. Joe Hart wants to play football. You know, he's plenty of money in the bank, and he came up, and that's impressed me, that we have a player that wants to play for us, because we witnessed a couple of players last season that didn't want to play for us, and that's very encouraging. And now, Matt, there are positives this season. We're back watching football. We're back in Celtic Park. You know, fans are back, and everyone's return to paradise has been great. Just the whole match day experience, going for a point. We travel, you know, bumping into people in airports, you know, bumping into lads on supporters' buses. So, you know, on a positive level, yeah, that's great. It's disappointing, you know, the results, but it's going to be tough on Thursday again, Matt, because we come up against a Bundesliga team, Leverkusen, second in the league. I think they've lost one game. I think they were beaten 4-3 by Dortmund. They've drawn a game and they've won 4, I think, out of those 6. The second in the league behind Bayern Munich. So it's going to be a tough ask with this bare thin squad we have. Yeah,
this was a tough enough game, Andrew, get into it with a full complement of players, you know, with Juranovic fit, with McGregor fit, Julian and Kyogo. That was a tough enough ask with these players. We're looking at a squad just now who are, as I've said previously here, kind of more or less running on empty. They're playing twice a week. They're not getting a chance to recover properly because there's no option to put in place of them. So this is going to be a real difficult game. Second in the Bundesliga. I just think that this season, you know, we're going to have to be prepared for some disappointments. I think that's the only realistic way of putting this. Don't want to say that, but we have to look at what we've got and what we're up against. We could have done without European football this season, to be honest with you. You know, it would have probably have done us better off in the league. And the league is the bread and butter, and it's what we want. But we're in a group stage now, and we have to deal with it. It's back to the old thing. We've got very poor pool of players, and we're going to have to make the best of it. But I think we're going to have to strap ourselves in this season for a bit of a rough journey. And I would only like to think that supporters' frustrations, there are obviously justified supporters' frustrations. I just like to think that most of the fans would focus their frustrations on the right people, which is the board. I think the manager is just holding things together, no more at the minute. And we'd be in a bit of a chaotic situation if he walked out tomorrow. And I think he's one of these guys, if you push him too far, you might just say no. Because he's got straightforward ideas, he's got straightforward plans, he's got a way of thinking. But he needs the tools for the job. You know, if you get the best joiner in the world round to your house to do a job for you, but it hasn't got a salty cut wood, then he ain't going to be able to do anything. It's the same way Ange. Ask him to do a job, but you have to give him the tools, i.e. the players, to get that job done. And we know right now the pool are dreadfully short. That's the main problem for me. And the main problem that's happened is because the board are not challenging each other. They're not challenging the guy at the top to get things right. They're just sitting there waiting for one person to make a call. And that's not the right way to run a football club.
Well, Matt, the board are not going to challenge the major shareholder. He's not the owner, he's the major shareholder in Dermot Desmond.
Well, why are they there? What are they doing there? What is their job?
But, they're not going to, because you hit the nail on the head earlier. They're comfortable. They're happy. They've got all the perks. A lot of them have been there a long, long time, Matt, which isn't healthy either. But now you're involved in tackling the old board in the original Celts for Change movement. From your experience, if the board are not going to challenge the major shareholder in bringing in change and bringing in a structure that the fans deserve, because as you say, we punted the money again. We punted it last season, but yet we're getting shortchanged. I think that's how. And we're looking for direction. And the Celtic Trust get pelters when they come out and they ask these questions. People give them pelters. But as shareholders, as small shareholders, we need to be representative, because the associations, Matt, and I don't mean any disrespect to the supporters associations, but they are powerless.
Well, I think at the minute, with the current Celtic setup and with a board who are never going to challenge the main shareholder, we have a pretty hopeless situation, unfortunately. If I could think of a way around this, I have got experience of thinking about these things and putting these things into action and seeing them through and sticking it out. And I'm looking at this situation just now and I'm seeing the fans' hands much tied because of the amount of shares that are not in actual supporters' hands. That's the main problem here. And you can't actually sack a PLC board because they just vote on somebody else. And the reason is because they have the power and the mandate to do that. That's the problem here. You have to look at what the problem is. We can shout sack the board forever, but you have to have a way of making that happen. And that can't happen when all these people hold all these shares. It's as simple as that. It's as straightforward as that. And that's a pretty down situation, but I'd rather be realistic than not be realistic.
Yeah, there's unless we can get, I think it's 5%, but then we get talking, we can get talking rights at AGMs and that. So unless we get 5% as a unit, as Celtic supporters, I think that's the first step, Matt. But yeah, it's just the frustration of not having, like, the silence, and not having anyone to answer to us as fans. As season ticket holders, I've said it before, we're customers. As shareholders, we have a chance, but as you say, they just have so many shares.
No, that's the problem. The supporters were given the chance to buy shares, and they did so in great numbers. I think probably 17,500. I think back in 94, 95. But there's so many powerful people out there with so much money, and there's only so much that a working class person can buy in shares, and Celtic fans did rally and answer the call because they were never allowed to have shares prior to 94. But because of the amount of shares that are out there, it's pretty impossible, for people to have the money to buy all of the shares. So that's when the business guys come in. And you've got, I think it's Lindsell Investments.
Lindsell Train, yeah.
Nick Train, who runs them. I think he's New York based. And he's got about, his company is an equity company. They've got about 18% of Celtic. So how could Celtic fans sack Nick Train? They don't even know what it is. They don't even know what it looks like. And to sack Nick Train, you have to have somebody to buy all Nick Train shares, and Nick Train would have to agree to sell all his shares. But he's just one example of a huge part of the club. Just under a fifth of Celtic is owned by an equity company. And then you have Dermot up about late 20s shareholding. And then you have other shareholders who just like having shares in Celtic but don't like putting their head above the parapet. Then you have the board. And then, of course, you've got all the fans. And the vast majority of shares are not in the supporters' hands. That's the problem. And there's no point in thinking that's not the problem, because it's staring us right in the face. My main bone of concern here is that we have a board of directors who are just paying lip service to the major shareholder. And that I find a major stumbling block in affecting any change here. These people will sit there and they won't challenge, and I find that really frustrating. And I always go back to the point, it's the fans that finance Celtic, and when I see these guys sitting there, and we're working class people financing the club, but they'll sit there and not challenge to make Celtic a better club, I find that really, really frustrating. I mean, I'm actually not showing how angry I am just now because I'm keeping it in, but I find that really, really frustrating.
Yeah, Matt, and hopefully we'll not be frustrated when we're coming down the road from Aberdeen on Sunday, because that's our next domestic game, league game against Aberdeen. And it's funny, I didn't think it when I seen the fixture list that it would be a mid-table clash when we went to Pittodrie, because they're another team that's struggling. They've struggled for form, but it's always a great away day for the fans. And as fans, you know, all we can do at the moment is go back the team. We may not be happy with the board, but we still have to back the team and back the manager, because you hit the nail on the head earlier, Matt. And I just want to finish up on this now. When you said, you know, if Ange goes, you know, who comes in? We're back to square one, and like, he needs the tools, and he needs a bit more time. And I think the players need time as well. You know, if, as you said, you're frustrated, direct your frustration towards the boardroom and not the dressing room at this moment in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hopefully Ange, you know, with this current situation that we've discussed at length today, I think in pretty decent detail as well, hopefully Ange is the kind of guy who'll stand up and say, no, I'm not accepting that. I don't want you to sign that player. I want to sign that player. You know, people will say, well, how could Ange know about McCarthy and Scales and Juranovic, maybe Sean, Urogahide, players like that? Well, you know, he probably didn't. I don't know who would be responsible for signing these players. I look at James McCarthy, and yesterday I saw a player playing an absolutely luxury passing to the side game. Honestly, at my age or your age, we could probably do. No running forward, no forward balls, no momentum going forward, no searching out a player. Just taking the ball and leaning back and doing the big luxury pass, sideways, backways, the easy pass. And I don't think that's Ange's type of guy. He took him off at half time. I know there was a heavy tackle on him 15, 20 minutes prior to that. But he came out at half time fully kitted up with a tracksuit top on and sat in the crowd still with his strip on. So if there was an injury there, and I'm not saying there wasn't, but it seems strange to pop a player back into where they're seated now due to the restrictions, fully kitted out. So I just like to think that Ange would be the kind of guy who will say, no, I'm not having that. No, I don't need another guy in like that. I want this guy in, and I want to sign this guy, and this is the guy I want. That's all we can really hope for. Because if he doesn't do that, and we get a bunch of bench fillers and just people in there who are not actually making an impression on the team. I mean, what we're looking for is footballers to make an impression on the first team. For footballers to come in and do a job in the first team. We have a whack of players, a whole raft of players who are not actually doing that because they're not good enough. So when we have the frustrations at board level, we've discussed them. The only hope now as fans is that Andrew's a strong guy and says, this is what I want. No, you're not putting that player on me. I want this guy. That's where his strength needs to come in.
Matt, thanks very much for your honest opinion. It's always a pleasure to chat, but I can see the frustration in your voice. I can hear that frustration, Matt. I'm feeling it myself. But I'm not throwing the towel in just yet. I'm disappointed with the board. I'm disappointed with what's going on behind the scenes of Celtic. But I'm prepared, like so many fans, to give the manager a chance, and I hope the board do too.
Well, that's the thing, Andrew. You said you're not throwing the towel in. Well, we don't throw the towel in ever. We never throw the towel in because we're here all the time. And they know we're here all the time. And maybe that massive, I would like to consider it a strength by supporting the club. We'd be treated more respectfully rather than somebody just taking us for granted that we'll always be there and pay the way. The thing is, we will be. That's the bottom line. We don't walk away and we don't throw towels in. So we just have to stick with the manager, keep giving the support and try and keep a cool head. And when the anger and frustration comes out from fans, which it will, we have to make sure that it's focused in the right place and it doesn't put off a person that we want to have at the club. I think I have to give the guy a chance.
100%, Matt. Matt, best of luck with the fanzine. I'm looking forward to the next issue. I'm a subscriber, so I get my copy in the post, folks. That's the alternative view. You can pick up a copy in all good news agents and some not so good news agents in Glasgow and the greater Glasgow area. Folks, if you enjoyed the conversation with myself and Matt and you want to hear more, you can go into the YouTube channel Celtic Fanzine TV. It's also on audio on the Celtic Soul podcast. And if you would hit that subscribe button, that would be great too. So, folks, thanks very much and enjoy your week.
Cheers, Andrew.